This video explains a few important technical details related to the generated rig in Rigify. First, I'll show you an explainer video which I recorded with Blender 2.9, and it will apply to all Blender versions where you see these squares in the Armature tab. So anything from Blender 2.9 up to 3.6. And then I'll show you how things changed in Blender 4. Need a Blender add-on? Stop by addons.cgdive.com and discover hundreds of well-organized Blender resources. There are a few technical details that you need to be aware of once you generate your rig with Rigify. Let's create a basic human metarig and generate it. And go to the Armature tab and look at the layers. In general, all the layers from layer 0 to layer 27 will be populated with widgets and controls for your generated rig. Layer 28 is reserved for the root of your character. So if I shift click layer 28, it would hide the root. A root bone is always automatically generated by Rigify, and it moves the whole character in pose mode. Next, I'm going to click on layer 29 and hide the metarig. If I select any of the bones, you'll notice that they all have the prefix DEF, and that stands for deformation. That means that these bones are actually used for the deformation of your character. The deformation bones in layer 29 give you a good representation of the structure of your character. If I click on layer 30, that will unhide the layer of the MCH or mechanism bones. Rigify creates those bones based on the structure of the metarig and the rig types that we define there, and these bones create a lot of automations that make our lives easier. And on layer 31, all bones have the prefix ORG, which stands for original. If you compare this to your metarig, you'll notice that it is exactly the same. So this layer preserves the shape of the bones from the metarig. I once asked one of the original creators of Rigify about this layer, and he told me that the ORG bones are the glue that holds the different rig components together. And I personally cannot tell you anything more useful than that. You shouldn't worry too much about the ORG, MCH, and DEF bones. As a general rule, you shouldn't tamper with them unless you really know what you're doing. Okay, now let's do the same with Blender 4, and I have 3.6 on the side just so we can compare the new bone collections to the old bone layers. So in 3.6 I'll create my basic human and also in Blender 4 and generate them. Okay, so as you just saw, in all the versions of Blender we had this limited number of squares, and we had to remember what kind of function each of these squares has. In Blender 4, with the new bone collections, we have basically the same system, except that first, there is no limit of the amount of layers that we can create, and also each layer has a name, rather than being a vague square. And so now, for the main parts of our rig, we have named layers, and then at the bottom, you should see root, ORG, MCH, and DEF. Root corresponds to layer 28 in the old system. DEF corresponds to layer 29, MCH to layer 30, and ORG to layer 31. By the way, if you want to hide or unhide a layer here, you just click on the eye icon. And with the old bone collections, we could just click on a layer to see a solo representation of that layer. In Blender 4, what you could do is select that layer that you want to solo, and then you can go to the additional options and choose solo visibility. Oh, and here I have an alpha of Blender 4.0. So let's see what we have here. So you should see the same collections. Again, we can hide and unhide them with the eye icon. What's new here is this star icon, which is basically solo visibility. But what is cool is that once you disable solo visibility, you'll have the previous visibility settings. And you can solo multiple collections. So in other words, it's another layer of visibility control for your bone collections. And one more thing that you can do in this version is to nest collections, which Rigify isn't using extensively so far, so it should not affect the tutorial. Anyway, in the next video, I'll show you how to organize the ogre bones, and it will have two versions. One for the older bone layers and one for the newer bone collections. And in other videos, I'll be displaying overlays to let you know how the bone layers that you see in the video correspond to the new bone collections. That's it for this chapter. Please like, subscribe, and check out our other projects, academy.cgdive.com and addons.cgdive.com.